When I was a child, I never imagined that a seemingly ordinary winter vacation could become a nightmarish experience that would linger in my mind forever. This isn't just a fleeting memory from those days. It's an encounter with something dark and malevolent that has left an indelible mark on my soul. I was about 10 years old when my parents decided we should take a winter vacation to a remote coastal town. We had endured a particularly stressful year, and they hoped this getaway would offer some much-needed peace. The town was isolated, with a charm that seemed frozen in time. The streets were deserted, and the few remaining shops appeared closed for the season, their windows fogged over from the cold. We arrived just as dusk began to settle. The sun sank below the horizon, casting long, eerie shadows across the empty streets. The wind was relentless, howling through the narrow alleys and making the temperature drop sharply. Despite the frigid air, I was excited to explore the beach, which was a short walk from our rented cottage. My parents, exhausted from the drive, decided to stay in and rest, leaving me with a sense of freedom I was eager to embrace. As night descended, the temperature plummeted further. The sky was a deep, inky blue, with the crescent moon casting a ghostly light over the landscape. I wrapped myself tightly in my coat and ventured out. The beach, illuminated only by the pale moonlight, seemed almost otherworldly. The sand was covered with a thin layer of frost, and the waves crashed rhythmically against the shore, their sound muffled by the howling wind. The beach was completely deserted, a vast expanse of icy sand and churning sea. I walked further from the town's distant lights, the darkness enveloping me like a heavy shroud. The silence was profound, broken only by the occasional distant call of a seagull. It was then that I noticed a figure standing alone at the water's edge. The man was tall and gaunt, dressed in tattered, weather-beaten clothes that flapped violently in the icy wind. His stance was unnervingly rigid, and his face was obscured by the shadows, making it impossible to discern any features. An unsettling chill ran down my spine. I called out hesitantly, "Hello? Are you all right?" The man did not move. He remained perfectly still, his head slightly tilted as if straining to hear something beyond my comprehension. My heart pounded fiercely, and I felt an overwhelming sense of dread. My legs felt like lead, weighed down by fear and the biting cold. It was as if an invisible force was keeping me rooted to the spot. Suddenly, a faint whisper cut through the wind. The voice was barely audible, like a murmur carried by the gale. It seemed to come from the man, but it was indistinct and unsettling. The whisper repeated a single word: "Stay." The word echoed in my mind, its sinister tone paralyzing me with fear. I tried to turn and leave, but my body felt frozen, trapped by the icy grip of terror. I glanced back toward the figure, but he had vanished. The emptiness of the beach seemed to close in on me, and I felt a cold, creeping sensation of being watched. Finally, I managed to turn and sprint back to the cottage, my breath visible in the freezing air, my heart racing. That night, sleep eluded me. The image of the gaunt figure, standing alone in the freezing darkness, haunted my every thought. Every creak of the house seemed amplified in the silent, cold room. I replayed the encounter over and over in my mind, trying to make sense of it. The shadows on the walls seemed to shift and move, and every gust of wind outside sounded like the whisper I had heard. By morning, I was exhausted, but the real shock came when I saw the news. The local news reported a disturbing incident. A man had gone missing from the town. His description matched the figure I had seen on the beach. The reports were filled with speculation and fear, as the locals spoke in hushed tones about a ghostly figure known as the Watcher of the Shore. According to them, this spectral presence appeared before tragic events, a harbinger of doom linked to the cold, empty beach. Intrigued and terrified, I learned more about the Watcher's legend. The stories painted a grim picture. The Watcher was once a sailor who had met a tragic end at sea. His spirit, bound to the icy shores where he had perished, was said to appear before disasters. The locals described him as a grim figure, a spectral warning whose presence was always followed by misfortune. The more I learned, the more unsettled I became. The tales spoke of how the Watcher's appearance was a prelude to calamities, a warning to those who ventured too close to the beach. Locals recounted strange occurrences and disappearances linked to sightings of the Watcher. Each story was more chilling than the last, and I couldn't escape the feeling that I had narrowly avoided something far worse. I could not shake the memory of that night, even after we moved out of the village and went back to living in the city. Every winter, when the nights lengthened and the bitter winds started to blow, I had a familiar uneasiness. A haunting symbol of that night was the sight of the gaunt figure standing calmly on the chilly, deserted beach. The haunting plea, "Stay," and the chilly, deserted shore served as a continual reminder of my meeting with something very evil. The Watcher of the Shore is a spirit that haunts the deepest recesses of my consciousness with his eerie presence and silent watch. I can't help but feel that he is still there, waiting in the shadows of that lonely shore, always on the lookout, destined to die on those cold sands. His eerie presence reminds me of the night I encountered a being who exists on the border of our world and is always waiting for the next soul that dares to approach too closely to the dark.